Hey, Restorers, Pastor Ryan. I'm really excited to be here with you this week. All Things New. It's a new series that we've been in for a couple of weeks now, and just talking about this life of transformation. You know, it's what happens when you meet Jesus. What happens when someone encounters Jesus and has this transformation in their life. And we're going to look at Luke chapter 8 this week. But before we get in there, have you ever felt as if someone's watching you? Like you just have this sense that you're not alone, right? That there's something there. And then maybe you felt that way when you actually checked the house or checked the room or you know, whatever. You realized you were alone, but you just have this sense, right? Now, I've been a dad for over 11 years, and there have been times when I've been just a dead sleep. And this is usually when my boys were younger. And I was in a dead sleep, just knocked out, cold. And all of a sudden, I wake up, right? And I just have this sense that I'm being watched. I haven't heard anything necessarily, but I just have the sense that I'm being watched, right? And I'll look over on my side of the bed and I see one of my sons standing there staring at me, right? And I'm like, what in the world, right? You kind of like jolts you up. And so I've had this experience, and usually it's weird. They need to use the bathroom, but they had to walk by the bathroom to get to my room. And so you just have that experience, right? Being watched. And I lived in the Doe's basement for 4 years. And during this time, I don't know if they experienced this, but several times, I would be at the foot of their bed watching them sleep, right? No, I'm just kidding. I wasn't doing that. But you've had that experience where you felt as if someone's watching me or something's going on, and I can have just this sense around me. So I believe that all humans are born with this sense, that ability to have that sense that someone's watching us or someone's in the room with us. Maybe it's just this helping us survive, right? This instinct that's part of who we are. Now, some of us, I believe, are better than others. I believe some of us have maybe like 1 or 2% of it, and so they are just clueless on their instinct, and they just are bad at it. But some, like children, border on serial killer level good at this sense, where they can kind of sneak around without you really knowing it, but you know they're there. This instinct, this feeling that someone is there with me. Let's look at Luke 8. Starting in verse 40, it says, "Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman who was there had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. 'Who touched me?' Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, 'Master, the people are crowding in and pressing against you.' But Jesus said, 'Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me.' Then the woman, seeing that she could no longer go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace.' While Jesus was still speaking, someone from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader, came. 'Your daughter is dead,' he said. Don't bother the teacher anymore. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe and she will be healed. When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. Stop wailing, Jesus said. She is not dead, but asleep. They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, my child, get up. Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. In other translations, they mention this story. In other books, Mark shares this story, and he says it was a deliberate touch. In Mark and Luke, we have this story. The story of this woman who has been bleeding for 12 years, and a story of Jairus and his daughter. And this phrase kind of sticks out here in this moment. The phrase that the woman uses in Mark, if I can just. If I can just touch the hem of his garment. If I can just. I don't need to bother him or talk with him. I don't need to be in front of him. He doesn't need to see me. If I just. See, we think of this at times as an act of humility. That she's being humble and saying, oh, if I can just touch the hem of his garment. But I wonder how many times this woman, this bleeding woman, has shared this to herself. I wonder if after the first few encounters with these healers, these people that were supposed to heal her, I wonder if she said those words to herself. If I can just get enough money saved, I can go to this new healer. See, Luke shares in her story that she has been bleeding for 12 years, that she's been to everyone and anyone who will meet with her and take her money. Mark shares this phrase that says, from the Message paraphrase, says, a woman who had been suffering a condition of hemorrhaging for 12 years, a long succession of physicians had treated her badly, taking all her money and leaving her worse off than before, had heard about Jesus. If I can just. See, not only did she suffer from this bleeding for the 12 years, every single time she goes to somebody, it gets worse. And they take her money. See, but her bleeding would not have only affected her physically, her bleeding would have affected her standing in the community. Even if her family didn't want to, she would have been labeled an outcast, labeled as unclean. that even if they wanted to be in her presence and wanted her to be there with them, because of the customs of the day, because of how rules and regulations operated in their community, she would have been seen as unclean. And because she was unclean, because she had this bleeding, because of this, she would not have been able to participate in regular society. She would have been considered an outcast, unclean. You don't belong here. So even for her to come into the community of the pressed in moment of Jesus would have been something that she would have had to fight against. She was not to be there in this moment. Like, her being there was her being there in that moment was a test of her faith. See, so this healing that she was going through, this healing that she had hoped for, was massively deeper than just this physical manifestation in her life. See, if you can feel the depth of her pain, you can feel the depth of the fear going on in her heart that it's, am I willing to risk one more time? Am I willing to place myself in a position for it not to work? See, in the past, she had to be seen. She had to be in front of or near a healer. But this time, she wants to be unseen. She wants to be just another person in the crowd. If I can just get to Jesus, he can come and heal my daughter. She is suffering and she is near death. If I can just get there, if he can just come. See, this has to be a massive emotional tug of war for Jairus. I mean, you have to realize that in his line of work as working in the synagogue, as a leader in the synagogue, he has been hearing the stories of Jesus. And he's been hearing the stories of Jesus not just from this point of view where the disciples are sharing this positive news. He's also hearing it from the point of view of the other leaders and rulers that are trying to take him down. And so he's hearing these stories of this teacher, this preacher, who is doing these amazing things. And yet he's got to have this internal struggle, this tug of war within him. And he's like, I know what my coworkers, right, are saying about him, how he's evil and he's filled with Satan, and he's doing all these things, but it's not of God, because he's claiming to be something, but at the same time, he's also has a daughter who's sick and dying at home, and he's like, what if they're wrong? He may have had access to these stories and these thoughts, and this internal struggle was probably there for some aspects. And he's trying to piece this together, and he steps out in faith. He steps out, maybe a little bit of fear, maybe a little bit of uncertainty, like, Where's my standing going to be? If I go forward with this and I meet this Jesus and I ask him to come to my home, where's my standing going to be? So does he risk going against the rules that he serves with? That what if Jesus isn't who he's claiming to be? What if I get there and he's not that? And where's my standing? What if Jesus is a real deal? What if Jesus is the real deal and I don't take this chance and I don't go meet him and I don't ask him to heal my daughter? So can you feel this tension within Jairus? So Jairus goes and he pleads with Jesus. If you'll just come to my home. See, waiting is a hard thing. I like to think, that I'm really good at waiting. But honestly, I'm not that great. When there's pain in my life or someone else's life around me, for me, waiting is not an option. About 8 years ago, I was in Jefferson, Iowa. I was working in hospice, and as I was working there, I decided one day since I was a ways from Des Moines and a ways from home, I decided to eat at Pizza Ranch in Jefferson, Iowa. All right, and so I had this really great deal, okay, where I was working as a secret shopper, and this came up as a Pizza Ranch that I could go in and basically I would eat, and then they would pay me for eating there, and they would pay for my meal. So I thought this is a fantastic deal. I'm always looking for a steal of a deal. Go there, I sit down, get my plate, and I start eating. I take a few bites of my food, and all of a sudden, like I'd been punched in the back, I just have this massive pain in my lower back. I mean, it was like it literally came out of nowhere. I had no idea. All of a sudden, bam! It's like this pain, and it was achy at first and hurt, and then it gradually got worse. And I tried to eat, and maybe I'm just hungry, so I ate a couple bites, and I was like, oh man, it just kept getting worse and worse. My back is hurting, and I'm going to use the bathroom, right? So I went to use the bathroom, and was in there for a little while, came back out, still in tremendous amounts of pain, and then I decided to lay down in the booth at the Pizza Ranch. I was at the Pizza Ranch, so I laid down on my back, and the people that were working there and the other patrons were probably thinking to myself, what is wrong with this guy, right? And so after a few minutes, I sat back up and tried to take another bite, and just still this massive amounts of pain. And so I was an hour from home, an hour from Des Moines, and my office was at a hospital not very far from there. And so I decided to head to my office and just kind of just lay down or relax there. So as I start heading out, I realize I've not eaten my money's worth. And so I go to the front counter and I ask them for a refund, because that's, of course, what I would do, rather than just going and leaving because I have so much pain. I kind of walk up to the counter and say, I didn't really eat anything. I've got really massive amounts of pain. Can I get a refund? And they, of course, say no, right? Because why would they give me a refund? So I go to the car and I actually lay down on the back seat, put my feet up a little bit, and I just lay there, hoping that if I lay there for long enough, the pain will go away. And it doesn't. And so I stagger out of the car, get in the front seat, go to the hospital, and I go down in the bottom level by the clinic where my office is at. And I go through the doors and past the reception desk, go down to my office, and I kind of sit there for a moment in my chair, and the pain is still getting worse and worse. And so I actually this time kind of slump onto the floor, and I'm laying on the floor in my office. And now our office is in this kind of back part of the hospital. We're in old rooms, exam rooms. And so my feet are actually like at the edge of my door. So if you walk by, you can see my feet sticking into the hallway just a little bit. My coworker, one of the nurses, the hospice nurse, sees me laying down on the floor and comes and asks me, "What are you doing? What's wrong?" And I kind of explained to her. She kind of asked me my symptoms, and she says, "Ryan, I think we need to take you to the ER." And I'm like, no. I just need to lay here for a few more minutes. I'll be fine. And she gets another nurse, and they kind of talk to me, and they gather more of my issues, and I realize they're like, "I think you have kidney stones. We need to take you to the ER so you can get some medication and get you fixed up and get you taken care of." And so I'm like, no, just give me a few more minutes. And finally they convince me, and they slump me in a chair, and they wheel me down the hallways to get to the ER, and they walk up and say, "I got one for you. Here's his symptoms. We think he has kidney stones." And they bring me back. They do the workup on me, and I realized, yeah, I've got kidney stones. And it was the worst pain I have ever experienced. They asked me, "Do you want, what kind of pain reliever do you want? Do you want the good stuff, or do you want stuff that's going to take the edge off?" And I'm like, "Well, can I go home with the good stuff?" They're like, "No, you have to have somebody come get you. You can't drive with it." So they end up getting I am calling Sarah, and Sarah and David come down to Jefferson and get me, and we head home. And a few days later, I started feeling a lot better. Medication was working. And even through my stubbornness, right? Even through me being massively stubborn, they helped me, and I found relief. About a year ago, I started feeling similar pain. Again, originally my lower back just started to hurt. It was just, I could start to feel this when I felt like it was kidney stones again. So I went to the doctor. They said, "Well, we'll try you on this medication, and we'll see how it goes." And the pain was still unbearable. The pain was so difficult. And I kept advocating at different doctor visits over the next few days and weeks. And I remember going and seeing a doctor, and they brought me in for an ultrasound. And as they brought me back, and they told me, "Hey, you'll have the results by the end of the day. Just call back in." And so I called in, and I didn't get anything. I called the next day, and I didn't get anything. I went back to the doctor, the same doctor I saw the second time, and she's like, "Well, we'll give you, I want you to try the medication still, and we'll give you like a different pain medication." And over the next few days, I continually advocated for myself. But this time, I couldn't get them to take it serious. This time, I kept asking over and over for help. And my voice felt as if it just dropped. That I no matter how many times I would ask and ask and ask, I felt like they wouldn't validate my struggle. Say one of the answers, I needed the medication because my pain was so severe and I just wanted help. The problem was not that I had pain. The problem that I had was I wasn't being seen. See, I wanted those with power to see me, to honor the sense for the need of this pain to be transformed. Were they going to validate my struggle and my pain? I just wanted to have the answers. I wanted to receive medication to help, and I was met with silence or the idea that I needed to wait just a little bit longer. If I can just get the help that I need, if I can just get this pain medication, if I can just get the help that I need. What is your if I can just with God? See, well, the healing for this woman, this woman that's been bleeding for 12 years was in an instant. It took 12 years of her life to get there. She had been waiting and waiting, searching for somebody that was able and willing to heal her. See, the people she had reached out to had trusted, had paid, only made things worse. Time and time again, the people who she trusted to help her only brought things to a worse situation. There had to be this massive fear in her. There had to be this idea of, can I really trust one more person? There had to be a fear that this will never end. But I think that this healing that Jesus brought to her was deeper than what she was searching for. She was searching for a physical healing. See, Jesus doesn't want just to heal the needs that we see and are come for. See, Jesus goes deeper for her, deeper for us, deeper in this moment. See, I can sense as I read this passage, and as I've read it over the last week, I can get this sense that maybe she was dragging herself. Maybe there was a sense of hopelessness, of fear as she went to Jesus. That all of this pain and grief she was carrying, all of her lack of faith and trust in those around her, the fear that has started to manipulate her own heart, telling her that she was not worthy of seeing Jesus face to face. The idea that she was only worthy of the if I can just. See, that fear that she says, I'm just going to be another person in the crowd. I'm just going to get close enough that I can touch his garments, just touch the edge of his robe. I think that she had hoped to just be another face in the crowd. As Jesus is walking by, if I can just reach out quick and touch. See, the woman was not just another face in the crowd to Jesus. There are times in our lives that we just want to blend in, be another face or a body in the crowd, yet God calls us to be different. He calls us out from the crowd. But in the grace that God has, he sees this woman. He saw her for who she was. And he called her out. He didn't call her out as maybe a penalty or this infraction of who she's been living this life as. We think at times when someone calls us out, it's a bad thing. They call us out for our fear and our concerns. But Jesus calls her out. He sees her because he wants to elevate her faith. To share with her that it wasn't you touching my robe that made you well. It was your faith. The faith that you had to try one more time. That you had the faith to find the one who could transform you from broken to healed. To have her position in the community healed as well. See, this woman's life was transformed because now she could be in community with others. As Jesus was speaking with this woman, as he healed her, as her faith has made her well, as someone comes into the crowd and lets Jairus know that his daughter has died. That the greatest fears that he has had to lose his daughter that they tried so hard to get through the crowd, to get there quickly, that his daughter has now died. But Jesus calls into their fears. See, Jesus calls into the fears of this family and says, do not be afraid. Just believe and she'll be healed. See, Jesus knew their hearts. Jesus knows our hearts, and that there's a tendency to lean towards fear when things don't go as we hoped. So he does what he does best, and he kind of heads off their fears quickly, right? He's like, I know that you think she's dead. I know that there's this fear for you to just kind of go into this wailing and moaning moment. They go to the house, and Jesus brings her back to life. See, Jesus crushes the expectations placed on him. The expectations was that she's dead, Jesus, you can go about your stuff. It's nothing we can do about it now. The expectations were that you could have gotten there sooner, you would have healed her, but now that she's dead, you can't heal her. That's the expectations, and Jesus crushes those, expecting Jesus to move on. See, there's fear throughout this story. There's fear in one more time. See, this woman not only carried this bleeding, this woman not only carried the ostracization of the community, but she also carried the fear that I've been doing this for 12 years and it's not worked out. But I got to try one more thing. See, Richard Reimer shares in his book Soul Care that fear often threatens the foundation of our value. In our fear, we often seek to prove our worth, to control outcomes, to manipulate and control others. To conquer fear, we have to surrender our fears to God and trust him. Trust that he is with us, that he is for us, and that he loves us. And that's enough. See, this woman, she's been carrying this fear within her for a long time. And she's almost at zero with her worth. See, we see people approach Jesus all the time. We see people call out to Jesus all the time. On his way through communities, on his way out of towns. We have blind men and lame men calling out, Jesus, just heal me. Jesus. And they don't have that fear because they are just there. That's it. I'm going to call out to him. I'm going to give it all I have. But this woman's fear has controlled the outcomes of her life for a long time. See, transformation takes bravery. Bravery to conquer our fears that we're not good enough. Bravery to conquer our fears that God doesn't really love me. Bravery to conquer the fears that I can't overcome this sin, this addiction. See, to be transformed, to have this creation of all things new in our lives, we have to have trust. We have to surrender our fears to God and trust that he has our best. That he is with us, that he loves us, he is for us. So where do we need to be brave today? Have we been struggling for months, years? waiting for God to heal a part of us, waiting for God to set us free from areas in our life we've been struggling for. See, fear is there to threaten your foundation, the foundation of who you were created to be. That is in that fear. It grabs hold of the things that we may have been given to God. Because we know that God restores, God heals, God transforms. God makes all things new. See, those places in our lives we never thought could be changed, fixed, or healed, God desires to work in them. Some of us, myself included, you may have been struggling with a physical disability or a physical limitation. Maybe you've been in pain. Maybe you've had this physical thing that's been dragging you down, and you've been asking God to heal you. And I believe He can. Sometimes He chooses not to. Sometimes He chooses to wait. Sometimes He chooses for that physical limitation to be with us for a while. But see, I want to tell you that this woman's 12 years of her suffering weren't wasted. See, can you imagine the story that she's going to go and tell those around her? Can you imagine the story that she gets to tell now of how God healed her of her sickness, of how God restored her to her community? And then she says, even though I had suffering for 12 years, I had faith one more time. See, God doesn't waste anything. You may think that your past was a waste, your past story, the past things you've been through. You may be thinking that the past few months of your struggle with a sin or an addiction have been wasted. And then when God finally heals you and brings you out of that addiction, out of that struggle, that everything forward is gravy and everything back here is just a waste. See, the fact that she was an outsider in her own community, that she was unclean, God wasn't going to waste that anymore. See, in your life, you may feel that you need to be transformed, and maybe God will transform you. Maybe He'll make all things new in your life. Maybe there's a sin or an addiction or a fear that you've been wrestling with, and God comes in and removes that from your life and heals you of that. I want you to know that your past, those moments that you've come through, are not a waste. That those are the story you tell to others in need. So today, will you trust God one more time? Maybe it's with a family member that's struggling in an addiction. Maybe it's with a family member that's far from Jesus and you've been praying for them for years. Will you trust God one more time? Will you say, God, I'm coming to you again one more time? That the fears that I have that this person's never going to meet you, I'm going to trust you one more time. So that when the transformation happens, when all things are made new in your life and others' lives, just think of the story you get to tell. God restores, God heals, God transforms. God makes all things new.